Everyone hear me?
Yep.
Hey, sorry I'm late. I had technical difficulties. Everybody doing all right?
Good. How about you?
Doing good.
I'm doing good, Tom. How you doing, bud?
Doing great. Welcome, everybody. We'll go ahead and screen share. We'll get started. Can everybody see the Kentucky Assembly icon label? Everybody see that symbol?
Yes.
Everybody good?
Yes.
All right. Welcome to today's training. It's a Jural Assembly handbook training on chapters 1 through 10. Have someone read the Bivens decision, please. Volunteer to read.
I'm not going to read it, Tom.
Thank
This
you.
is Todd on Grant.
Thanks, Todd.
This meeting is private, bearing false witness, misrepresentation, and posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency or public agency of the federal, state, county, city, or township agencies present? Additionally, are there any U.S. citizens or citizens of the United States present? Anyone who is here under false pretenses, anyone who is working for any foreign government, including the territorial United States or municipal United States, anyone who is being paid for or paid or coerced to be here must fully disclose their presence and purpose now or leave the premises. If they subsequently show up as federal witnesses, they are discredited for failure to disclose. Is there any response to the Bivens decision? For a second time, is there any response to the Bivens decision? For the third and final time, is there any response to the Bivens decision? I think we're good, Tom.
All right, thanks for that, Todd.
Sure.
For future reference, Anna said in one of the latest meetings that we only need to read that one time. So
Okay, cool.
That'll make things a little easier. So I want to welcome y'all to today's training. I want to stress and emphasize that today is a training event, not a Jural Assembly pillar meeting necessarily, but we're here for training today. Purpose overall for today's training, I think we need to look at it. You could look at it from two different ways. I think today is a group effort. To use a bad word, a corporate effort, right? Individually, we all need to be familiar with the Jural Assembly handbook. That's Anna's own words, right? So we have our individual reading and studying training we have to do, but we all have to be able to work together as a group. It's kind of like a Marine at boot camp. Marine comes out of boot camp, highly trained, but he's not a experienced warfighter yet. That takes time, right? But he's got individual training on his rifle, right? He knows how to operate, manipulate, clean, and disassemble and rearrange his rifle. He knows individually how to operate within a group. He knows all his manuals individually. But that individually trained Marine has to be able to fight with other warfighters. Otherwise, he's pretty much useless. He can't fight on his own. So we've got our individual training to do, and we have our corporate knowledge, right? As a group, we have to be able to come together and fight fight the battle. So I look at today's training as our corporate effort. So we're not going to be getting in the weeds today. I see our purpose here at this training to familiarize ourselves with some of the concepts that are in this manual so that we can operate as a group and utilize this tool that we have, which is our weapon. Really, it's the only weapon that I know of, is the Jural Assembly handbook to fight our battle. And so I see our purpose as a group effort to be able to operate together. And because we have to do our individual training, I'm going to leave the getting in the weeds to our individual effort. And today, as a group, to be just familiar, have that basic understanding of some of the concepts that are in the book. And so, talking about our purpose, the goal, I think, at the end of our 6 weeks or however long it takes to get through the book, our goal is to be able to stand as a group on somewhat solid ground and have a confidence as a group that we can do the work then of standing up our pillar, of going into battle with relative confidence. So that's going to be the goal, is to corporately say we can get this done. Any questions on the purpose or the goal? Anything that didn't sounded funky or not right? Any questions on that? And please raise your hand. Use the hand emoji or just interrupt to ask questions.
She wants us familiar with the common law book too. It's on Amazon for like $70.
That's a good point, Laura. And that brings up another topic, is that if we're going to be jurors and fulfill all these roles, yes, we're going to need to be familiar with the common law. So once again, individually, our efforts should be geared towards other tools as well. ROE, rules of engagement for today's training. I welcome questions and discussions on anything that we cover today. If I say something you don't understand, please raise your hand and interject any other comments. However, I would like to not go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes, because that 6-week goal is going to go well past that if we get wrapped up into a lot of side discussions. But please ask your questions. This is not my training. This is our training. So let's make it what we want it to be, what you need it to be. If we need to have that discussion, let's have a discussion. And we'll go through our training, and then today at the end we'll talk about a better date and time. If Friday afternoon 3:30 isn't good, we'll discuss something else. Any questions on the overview? All right, diving right in. Does everybody have a hard copy of the Jural Assembly handbook? If not, best value copy online. I think you can get it for anywhere between $8 and $15, I think, plus shipping. So best value copy. You can get it bound. For me, it helps. I just like having the hard copy to take notes, highlight, remember where things are. That helps me. Chapter 1 is called For All Jural Assemblies. And she starts off by saying, although state jural assemblies are unique and dedicated to their individual state, it is necessary for everyone to know basic definitions and oppositions and roles so that everyone understands what they are doing and why. So the key point for me there is that it's a basic understanding of what's in the book, of definitions, what the roles are of the offices, and go from there. Not necessarily to be an expert in common law, although at some point we might want to be experts, right? And it makes mention of the difference between jural assemblies and jural societies. So the de facto has jural societies, corporations, persons, that work in the maritime jurisdiction. We have assemblies. That's we the people. We are the organizational units of land and soil jurisdiction courts. She says our state and county and local government have been taken over via a fraudulent, undisclosed process of unlawful conversion, which takes place when a state or county organization is converted to operate as an incorporated state-of-state franchise of any foreign territorial or municipal commercial corporation. So one thing that's been on my mind as I've read through this is that word incorporated. And I kind of wanted to see what you all think, your definitions of what it means to be incorporated versus unincorporated. Any thoughts or anything to add? Anything that helps you to understand what the difference is between incorporated and unincorporated? No one? So I did a little bit of digging on this, and incorporated is I think the difference between being de jure and de facto, right? De jure means you're on the land, you're a real person, man or woman on the land and soil, versus incorporated meaning you've chosen something else. You've chosen to be in a different jurisdiction, to not be real, something that is a fiction. And so if you're incorporated, then that means people become persons, and you make it a definite choice to remove yourself from the land and soil jurisdiction and place yourself in a different jurisdiction. If that makes sense. So people acting in unincorporated capacity as people who are members of a Jural Assembly decide, number one, physical boundaries of their states. Number two, adopt the public laws within their state. And number three, enforce the public law via their Jural Assemblies, land and soil jurisdiction courts, and the officers of those courts. So number one there, you decide the physical boundaries of your state. Well, how can you do that if you're at sea, right? So you have to, number one, make sure that you're on the land and soil, and we do that with our status correction. And so that we have the power then, since we are on the land, we can decide the physical boundaries of our state. Can't do that if you're a person at sea, right? So to me, that helps me to understand the difference between incorporated and unincorporated. Unincorporated means my jurisdiction is on the land. Anything that's incorporated is outside of that, sea, air, not of the land. Chapter 1, once again, talks about those 1860 conventions. We kind of went around this a few weeks ago. Duran, thanks for picking out that. I think you found this answers to common questions and misconceptions for the Jural Assemblies. 2 articles out there. Taking notes. Recommend you write these 2 articles down and search them on her website, and become familiar with these 2 articles, because they speak to these 1860 conventions in almost a complete manner. I think it kind of helps to solve the issue. Anyone read these articles? Duran, I'm guessing you have. Is Duran here?
He's not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions on chapter 1? Anything I missed? Anything that you want to cover more specifically? Chapter 2, Anna talks about law and religion. And this was a kind of a complicated subject for me to understand, because she basically says that the 10 Commandments, let's see, I'll move ahead more. The basis of American common law is the Ten Commandments, which are common to all three major land-based religions in the West. Does anyone have any familiarity with Islam, Muslim? I wasn't aware that Islam went by the tenets of the Ten Commandments, but it's in there. That's what she claims, and so that's the basis of our common law. And so our land and soil jurisdiction government is secular, not religious per se, for a reason. Separation of church and state. She says that allows the peace and provides for just treatment of all those living under the system. So our founders didn't give us a theocracy. They didn't say we're going to go 100% on the Bible and the Bible is the only document that we have. They said we're going to take part of that, which is the Ten Commandments, and build our common law on that. So really the requirement is that you have to be okay with the Ten Commandments. You can be whatever religion you want to be. Be a witch, I guess. And as long as you believe in the Ten Commandments, you can function as a jury member or in the Jural Assembly. Common law, we do elections and confirmations. And equity law, they do oath taking. She says Jural assemblies are constituted by people living on the land and soil of a country, and whether they're a Jew, Muslim, Christian, the same ethical standard of the Ten Commandments applies to everyone in Georgia as to everyone in Maine. Those who wish to function in the capacity of living people and who accept the ethical foundation of the Ten Commandments as their law are welcome to form their Jural assemblies and courts. And that's what we're doing. So I hope everyone's good with the Ten Commandments. She mentions in chapter 2 something about the holy cause. I had a question about that because I looked at the first inaugural address of FDR and I couldn't find the phrase holy cause in there. And as it relates to religion and law, I thought it would help to define what he was talking about, but I couldn't find the phrase holy cause in his inaugural address. But I think it's important to note that a lot of the deceptions came about right around that time with FDR and the gold confiscation and the emergency war powers. So anything else to add on chapter 2? Anything else you'd like to cover in more detail? Chapter 3 is titled, This is Not Opinion. She goes through a lot of the history. Talks about United States unincorporated, formed on July 1st, 1776, out of the Declaration of Independence. The United States of America was formed on September 9th, 1776. There's a holding company related to the Federation. Articles of Confederation, March 1st, 1781. So there's a lot of history that she goes through. And I think her point is to show that our history has either been changed or through the Civil War, things happened and we weren't allowed to come back in and reclaim our government. But it's important to understand that history and know where we came from so we can get it back. If we don't know what we had before the Civil War, then we have no idea what to look for and what to try to rebuild. So that history is important to understand. She says you must take control of your own government. Right? It was given to us by our founders. It really wasn't taken away. It's just been hidden or put off to the side, but it's up to us to get it back. Right? The delegated powers of the Confederation, that was the group of states. The Confederation And through that was the Constitution, right? The Constitution defined what the Confederation was allowed to do as a group of states. Well, that power in the Constitution was given to them by us, by the states, by individual states. We have to take that back, right? We need to take that power back. And nobody's getting in our way. She says that a couple of times in the book, that nothing is standing in the way of us setting up our pillar. She says when the original federal states of states were inoperable after the Civil War, those powers returned to the issuers of those powers. Those powers returned to the issuers, to the actual states and their federation, owned and operated by the living people, not the King of England. And so when our government ceased to function because of the Civil War, that power still remains. But who has usurped it? The crown and the Holy See. Right? They came in, since nobody claimed it, they came in and took it, but it's ours. All we have to do is say we want it back. And since nobody stepped in to do that, the crown and the papacy did it for themselves. She says, you are guaranteed the right to peaceably assemble. This is because people are sovereign and unincorporated entities. There's that word again, right? Unincorporated, meaning de jure, on the land. And because we're on the land and de jure, we are sovereign. There is no king, right? That's what the Declaration did for us. The Declaration said, no more king. We're done with you. Now we are the king, basically. The people of the land, on the land, are the king. And so that's where our sovereignty comes from. And but we have to remember that we have to stay unincorporated. We have to stay on the land and soil. Anything else? Chapter 3.
Hey, Tom,
Go ahead.
this is Todd and Grant. I was just going to ask a question because I'm going through this with my LLC because I'm trying to become unincorporated. And
Okay.
I haven't found the right, I guess, I don't know if I'll say right people, anybody that's gone through the same thing that I'm going through. So I didn't get to speak earlier because I'm actually out in my shop. When I texted you, if you got my text before, I started a bigger job today. So I'm kind of in the process of trying to manage two of these things at once. But just learning more about becoming in or unincorporated to get away from the system. That was one of the things I wanted to mention earlier, was that the system, when I signed up to have an LLC, I actually put myself in their system. Now I'm having to try to take that back. And it's not quite as simple as you might think. I mean, and you've got to go through, kind of jump through some hoops and do some things. But that's what I'm trying to do, is get back to the private and be a privately run company. So I don't know if that adds or explains or helps anybody with anything of understanding of the unincorporated versus the corporated or not.
What does that process look like to remove yourself from an LLC? Have you gone down that path at all?
Well, I'm in that process. The problem is you have to do this dissolution with the state, but then so we as American state nationals, so you get into the whole tax deal because we're not citizens of the United States, so therefore we don't have to file 1040. Well, Kentucky is a piggyback state, so Kentucky follows the 1040. So you get into the whole deal. Well, if you're not filing federal, but then you're filing state, then you have to figure out how to balance that. And then you're trying to balance the fact that I actually put myself in the system. So I kind of feel somewhat responsible to the state because I put myself in the system, but I feel no responsibility to the federal government because I'm not a DC citizen or a citizen of the United States. I'm a citizen of the United States, but not a U.S. citizen. Let's put it that way. Use their jargon. And then since I'm not a federal employee, we're not responsible to do a 1040. So as you learn through that, then you're trying to figure out how you manage that with the state. And then what I'm trying to figure out now is you have to have an EIN number as a business. And I'm trying to figure out, well, how do you do that when you switch from basically public to private? Because so many places want you to have an EIN number. And so it's, to me, I feel like you're back and forth between the two, between being public and private. And then there's some people that say you want to have a business trust, and some people say stay away from trust. And being new at this altogether, you're overwhelmed with all kinds of, like, you got one person saying this, one person saying that. Who's right? Who's wrong? Maybe neither one of them are necessarily wrong, but maybe it's just the way they look at it, their preferences. So that's the part that's been hard for me to navigate, is because I don't have a definitive answer, like this is right or this is wrong. And that's where we have to make our call as a sovereign. How do I make that call for myself? But if you're trying to get completely out of the system, then you have to continue to pursue this. And that's where I'm finding myself in this struggle right now.
Yeah, it sounds like
May I?
Please.
Go ahead, Anita.
Are you ever able to get on to Anna's Tuesday call?
I haven't been, no.
If you can get on there, because I couldn't remember who was talking about you're the one that has the window company?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There was somebody on there a couple of months ago asking about how they handle their contracts with being a contractor. And I'll try to go back through I'm sorry, my breath. I'll try to go back through some of the videos and find what she told them. But you definitely need to get on there and try to get a question into her. Because she was telling them, what they have to, the paperwork they have to give the people they're working for and everything, and not go through all the state and county statutes that you're going through.
Well, see, one of the things that I've ran into is like when you become in that system with an LLC, and it would be the same, I guess, with any other corporation, then you file all of these licenses. Well, everything that I've learned so far, a license is saying that it's illegal to do what you do unless you have a license. Well, it's not illegal to do what I do, it's just
being private. Yeah, you don't have to go through all that stuff, but you just have to get your mindset out of that stuff. But like I said, I'll try to go through some of the recordings and see if I can find it. But yeah, she said if I remember right, you just have to give them a statement stating that you're not incorporated, that you're private. But
well, and I appreciate that. If you can find that and get that to me directly, I don't want to take too much away from our Jural. I just want to mention that part of that process, because when he mentioned that, it is important, I think, to become private and become, unincorporated and not be a part of the system. So I don't want to take away from what Tom shared with us today as far as the Jural Assembly and get all.
Yeah, that's one thing. Being incorporated, uncorporated, I think, is unincorporated. You have your free will.
Right.
And when you get into incorporated, they set up all the license and all that stuff. So, but I'll try to find it for you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Tom, sorry about that. I didn't mean to get too far off there.
No, those are all, I mean, we're talking about incorporated versus unincorporated. And it's like learning how to be free versus, one of their slaves, and how to self-govern. And so it's important to have a good understanding. And I think once you figure it out, Todd, you're going to be a perfect candidate for the business assembly pillar, because you can teach everybody else how to do it. So please keep us informed on what you learn. Take good notes too, right? So you can go back and remember what you did and be able to teach us all later, because we all want to be able to operate our businesses, whatever that might be, on the land and soil. We don't want to have to
Right.
go.
And that's what I want to do. I want to be able to help other people because just like what we're doing now through the Jural Assembly, that's going to help, people's are going to have common law cases that we need to see and we need to be educated. And I think if we can help a fellow brother or sister out, whatever they're going through, then they maybe won't have to go through all the things that we had to do. So I
Right.
yield.
Exactly. Thanks. All right. Moving on, chapter 4, juror qualifications and membership. Most of this chapter, a lot of this chapter is about status correction. So this was written back in 2019, quite a ways away from where we are now. But she mentions the importance of having that status correction to be able to qualify for a jural assembly. Another thing she talks about is land ownership to be a part of the assembly. And one of the things she says about land ownership was that nobody not tied to the state by commitment to the land of that state should have a voice in the affairs of the state. In other words, if you don't own land, then you shouldn't have a voice, is what she's saying. And she backs that up a little bit by saying, otherwise people passing through the state could cast votes with no skin in the game. And she mentioned a group of people just coming in and claiming residency for a short amount of time, voting on a particular issue. So they have basically flood the vote and get their way, but they don't own any land. They don't have any really ties to the state. And then they go back to wherever they came from, kind of like what's happening at our southern border. So it's one thing for us to keep in mind as members of the Kentucky Jural Assembly is how important is land ownership to us for our members. Back to that article, the answers to common questions and misconceptions. She talks about the land ownership, and this is an excerpt from that article, and I'll just go ahead and read it. She says that land ownership is a tricky qualification of jurors. In the past, in a pinch, the land and soil that a man owns can be defined in his body. Dust thou art, and to dust returneth. But I would argue, and it is wise, that the Jural Assembly members should be attached to their state via the establishment of permanent homes and property interest in that state. The initial qualification for immigrants to become state nationals requires them to live in a state for at least 1 year and a day with no felony arrest and no claims for public assistance, and to establish a permanent home or dwelling within the borders of the state. I believe that the qualifications for Jural Assembly members should meet that criterion also. It's just something to be aware of, something to think about as a member of the Jural Assembly. And then she discusses it more in this article, and this was particularly talking about women and owning land. And so I encourage you to. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but she does say in there that a quorum of 30 male landowners at our first Jural Assembly meeting would be required to update the old state Jural Assembly rules about membership of women. So once again, just something to keep in mind as you're reading through chapter 4 and that article. Their answers to common questions. Be familiar with that and her recommendations there. Any questions on chapter 4? Chapter 5 is titled Mission Statement and Membership Agreement. And basically, this was just an example that she had from Wisconsin. So when we finish our training and we're ready for our first meeting, I'm going to type up something generic basically just cut and paste what she's got here for a membership agreement for anyone who wants to be a member of the Jural Assembly. And then there's a mission statement as well. So we'll have a Kentucky mission statement for our Jural Assembly, basically who we are, what our purpose is. And so there's a membership agreement and mission statement. And that's basically the extent of chapter 5. Any questions, anything to add, anything in particular that anyone would like to see as part of a membership agreement or mission statement, or anything we should stay away from? All right, moving on, chapter 6, pointers and questions. She starts off this chapter talking quite a bit about Donald Trump. And once again, this was 2019. She was pretty high on the Trump bandwagon. I'm not quite sure where she stands now, but some interesting thoughts there about what is Mr. Trump's republic all about. And then the second question she asks in there is, shouldn't all state assembly members cancel their voter registration? Is there anybody who hasn't canceled their voter registration or knows how to do that? Good. So we're pretty far ahead of the curve, I think. Anna says, yes, you have to cancel your voter registration. Otherwise, you have dual citizenship. All state assembly members must cancel and expunge all voter registrations. You cannot continue to vote in these foreign corporation elections without accepting dual citizenship and thereby making themselves ineligible to function as state citizens. All right. Any questions on canceling voter registration and why that's important? She also mentions the debold voting machines. This was back in 2019. I just thought it was interesting that the election, the crazy election in 2020, with all that, but a year prior, she was talking about the manipulation of voting machines. Another question she asked was, we are confused about which state or states we are supposed to be restoring. She says the states are operated by the people living in the state. The states of states are operated by the employees of the people living in the state. So that's always been a point of confusion. And whenever I hear state of state, I'm like, what is that? What is she talking about? Those are the services, right? The services that have been set up to run things like schools, roads, bridges, fire departments, all the services that we get as people. Those are the state of states that have been set up. But they're supposed to work for us, not the other way around. They're not supposed to require us to register anything or get licenses, right? We're supposed to tell them how they're supposed to operate. But that's all been turned around. So the states have been missing in action once again, thank you, Civil War, because the people have not known that it is their right and responsibility and duty to assemble their Jural Assemblies. And then she spends quite a bit of time in chapter 6 also talking about the history of the deception, going through the timeline of how everything got to the point where we didn't know our rights and responsibilities and how that came about. It's all good history to know. Questions on chapter 6? Chapter 7, she talks about titled discipline, dealing with provocateurs, people who disrupt the functioning of the assembly or impede the conduct of business in state Jural Assembly meetings, can and will be removed by the marshal at arms. So one of the tools we have to prevent provocateurs or to limit their disruption is the Bivens decision, right? She talks about typical tricks of these provocateurs, these disinformation agents and spies. And one of the things that she talks about is incitement to violence. And one of the methods they use there is the safety angle, talking about fear and paranoia. Well, the IRS is going to come down on you. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms is going to come down on you. Putting that fear out there so that we impede our progress. And she says the way to look at that, the proper and profitable attitude, is to keep calm and get even. Don't let it get under our skin. Don't let it get us riled up. She says we don't have to resort to violence or worry, right, about our recompense. All the notices have been published worldwide. The bad guys, in this case, have no place to escape, and the greatest danger we face is our own ignorance. I think that really says a lot, right? The only thing holding us back is what we don't know. The second thing that these provocateurs do is bait to trespass, and this is where I'm gonna need some help, because I don't really know anything about the Colorado 9. Does anyone have any insight on what that was all about? Says there was a disinformation agent named Michael Hamilton, who was an insurance adjuster by trade, insinuated himself and encouraged the people in Colorado to make a tragic mistake. They mistook the territorial and municipal courts and their officers for their own missing courts and public officials. So once again, that deception, that usurpation of what's really ours. So apparently this guy, Michael Hamilton, tried to use the existing C jurisdiction courts to address whatever issue he was facing. And of course, once you step in their courts or you utilize their courts or try to, basically saying, I give up my land power, my sovereignty that I have, and I'm willing to come into your court and operate your way. And so once he did that, he basically got himself in trouble, because they weren't going to play ball with him, I think. But I don't know a whole lot about the Colorado 9. She says when they try to draw you out to express anger against judges and attorneys, sit there quiet as a mouse and say nothing. So if we find someone at one of our meetings, or if you meet someone out and about and they're trying to get you upset about a particular case or a judge or an attorney, don't take the bait. Just sit there quiet as a mouse and say nothing, because it's only going to get us in trouble. We don't want to talk about what's in the sea. We want to stay out of their business and keep ourselves on the land. The third thing she talks about for these provocateurs is introduction of illegal goods and contraband in Ruby Ridge. Once again, I'm not spooled up on what happened at Ruby Ridge, but I think it involved some firearms and maybe some ammunition, the compilation of militia items, but it was from the de facto. It wasn't a land and soil gathering a militia. It was crossing the streams, I think, at Ruby Ridge, if I'm not mistaken. So if we want to gather firearms, militia items, ammunition, that needs to be a land and soil. It needs to come from folks that are status corrected and on the land and soil. We don't want anything to do with anything that's attached, any kind of corporation, anything that's attached to de facto.
Yeah, that was an FBI setup. Ruby
Right,
Ridge was.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Anita. And I think it ended terribly. I think the wife died and the kid, the son died. It was bad. Number 4 is fraudulent fundraising. Anna says that any fundraising that we want to do has to be free donation only. We don't involve ourselves with any kind of product or service from the de facto. It needs to be all organic pre-donation fundraising. Number 5 was immoral temptation or blackmail. And this is where she makes her warning to state Jural Assembly members that we need to conduct our lives as if our mothers and the entire church choir were behind one of those two-way mirrors watching, because they are. She says, warn your members, support each other, remind everyone to keep everything, including their own private lives, on the up and up. So when I read this, it kind of, the shoe kind of dropped. I was like, okay, this is for real. Because I guess they are watching, and we need to know that they know the power that we're going to have once we are set up, what we're going to be able to accomplish, because we do have de jure sovereignty and power, and they're afraid of that. So it would make sense that they're watching what we're doing, and anytime we step out of the boundary, they might be there to record it, video it, whatever, and bring it back in a way that's going to be unpleasant. So just keep in mind as we move forward, building our pillar, that everything we do, everything we post online, social media, texts, we got to keep it in the black. Otherwise, we might have to answer for it at a later date. Anything else on chapter 7? Chapter 8, she titles A Nation of Bastards. And this was a really good chapter. I thought she covered an awful lot of ground, and a lot of important concepts to understand. She starts off talking about ecclesiastical and canon law. Ecclesiastical, basically talking about religious rules for the people, canon law being religious rules for the priests. And she equates the ecclesiastical to public and the canon to private, the federal code, but that's all within the air jurisdiction of the papacy. And so talking about the papacy and air jurisdiction leads into the incorporation of the United States. Once again, the deception, the familiar words, the United States of America Incorporated, the United States of America Incorporated. So 2 different incorporations, 1868, 1925. Because we, the people, weren't there to take back what was ours, they couldn't rightfully take it, but they could take the name and make it something else, right? Put it de facto, corporate, legal fiction. So they used confusion and deceitfully similar names to take what was ours, okay? And because that's what the papacy does, they made one set of laws for the people, another set of laws for the priests. That's what they've done with federal code. And federal code is only supposed to apply to the people that work in the federal government. It's not supposed to apply to us, but because we've all been incorporated via our birth certificate, well, now they have the ability to make us all fall under their codes. And so one thing I wanted, this isn't in the book. This is unum sanctum. Anybody ever heard of unum sanctum? It's really eye-opening because basically with unum sanctum, the papacy, right? If you go back here and you say, well, how does the Pope, how does the papacy, how does Rome have the power to do anything in our country? Why do they think they can incorporate anything that is ours? Well, if you go back to 1302 and Pope Boniface VIII, he made this bull, this papal bull called Unum Sanctum, and he asserts his rights against King Philip the Fair of France. It's a landmark in the history of the doctrine of papal primacy. So this is the last sentence of the bull. It's basically the Pope, the papacy, Rome saying, we declare, we proclaim, we define, it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff. So if you think about it, 700 years ago, the Pope basically declared anyone who's born on the planet to be a subject of Rome. Right, so then you come back here and say, well, that's why they think they can do this type of stuff in America, because they think they own everybody. And of course, it all applies to kings in England, kings in France. Everybody was indebted to the Pope, to the Holy Roman Empire at the time. So that's where all this stuff comes about. But I thought it was important to realize that where does the Holy See, where does Rome think it gets all this power? Well, they basically gave it to themselves. They collected all the money through what do they call it when you pay your you pay for your sins to get into heaven? They call that penances, or can't remember what that's called. But they basically had all the money in Europe, and they made the kings indebted to them, and they basically just took this power and declared themselves to be in other words, you couldn't be saved unless you committed yourself to the Pope. And so because of that power that they think they hold, once again, de facto, it's a fiction, but they think they hold it, and because of that, everybody just sees it and they don't know the truth, and so they say, okay, well, now we have this infant decedent estate, and talking about the birth certificate and all the confusion that goes along with what happens there. So the Catholic Church refuses to recognize any marriage not given their stamp of approval. Thus, according to them, we are all bastards, wards of the state, unclaimed property. The afterbirth, so there's two people basically born in the hospital room. There's the actual baby, and then the afterbirth. And so she talks about Thomas Aquinas and the thinking of what is going on with the afterbirth. It has a pulse, it has DNA, it has blood, and so they considered that to be a human person. And so what happens in that hospital room is you've got an afterbirth, which is considered legally by the de facto a human person, and a baby. Well, she talks about it in the book that unbeknownst to the mother, usually the state, via the uniformed officer nurse, takes possession of that afterbirth, and once it's dead, they give it an estate. They give it a name. Well, what name do they give it? They give it the name that the mother wrote on the birth certificate paperwork. So I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but I think it's important to understand why the Roman Catholic Church thinks it has so much power and what they're doing with it. And if we know where that power comes from, and we can convince others that it's not real power, it's corporate, it's fiction. But we have to do the proper things to get back, right? If we've been considered at sea, we need to take the proper steps to get back on the land. And so they take possession of the afterbirth, but what happens to the baby? Mom and dad leave the hospital. The baby was in the mother's water at sea, but now the baby's not there anymore, so they just consider the baby lost at sea. All right, so pretty diabolical. She goes on to say that although our fathers were Christians, they did not create a theocracy. Theocracy is a government ruled by or subject to religious authority. We have a republican form of government, and our powers remain solidly based on unincorporated institutions. Once again, land and soil, right? That's where the real power, that's where de jure, that's where we have our standing, is on the land, not at sea. Right? Our state Jural Assemblies have the power and must demand the repeal of Federal Code Title 37 and end the registration of afterbirths as live-born Americans. Title 37, if you're not familiar, basically makes doctors and nurses, basically it calls them uniformed officers. They're basically considered part of the armed services. And so they, as uniformed officers, they're doing the work of the Holy See, of the municipality, and these registrations of babies and afterbirths. And so once our Jural assemblies are set up and functioning, we will have the power then as a de jure land and soil court to say, we're done with this. There is no Title 37 in Kentucky anymore. Okay. And I think that would do a lot to get rid of this whole C jurisdiction, everybody having to do their paperwork. If you don't do paperwork in the beginning to get to C, then you don't have to do anything to come back. It would just, everybody would just be born on the land and soil. So we could save millions of people a bunch of heartache and hassle by repealing this Title 37. Questions on Title 37? Anything else on Chapter 8? Moving right along, we're at 1 hour. Chapter 9 is called Grand Theories and Responses Debunked. She talks about, once again, some history. Facts are our actual government, which you are owed, is not fully operational. It is not functioning as it should because it was never fully restored after the Civil War. We have not restored it because we were not informed that it needed to be restored. Certain parties, right, the Holy See, the British Crown, profited themselves by keeping that obscured. Now that we have a grasp of the actual situation, we have the means to restore the government we are owed in our hands, and all we need to do is to do it. And that's what we're shooting for. That's our goal, is to get to a point where we can do it. Once again, I didn't really have a whole lot of information on Thomas Deegan or Bruce Doucette. She brings these two guys up in Chapter 9. Anyone familiar with either one of these guys? Once again, I think it was kind of similar to petitioning the government for redress, but petitioning the C jurisdiction courts for help, as opposed to setting up our own courts. Right? They're not going to want to help us. They can't help us. The C people can't help people on land. It just doesn't work that way. But I think that's what these guys were trying to do. We are to act in our unincorporated, our de jure, our land and soil capacity. Right? That dual citizenship, it doesn't work. We can't operate both capacities. We have to make things happen in our jurisdiction. Right? We can't ask the de facto for help, in other words. We don't petition their government, we operate our own government. And we tell them how we want the services they provide to be run. Once again, they shouldn't be telling us we have to register or get licenses or get a permit to build on your land. We should tell them how to operate the services that they provide. Everything's been flipped around. The municipal United States government, and this is towards the end of Chapter 9, she talks about the different names. They all capital names. The municipal government runs on the basis of accounts, as in bank accounts. So the example she gives is James Allen Johnson, all caps, is a municipal estate trust bank account that belongs to the British Territorial United States citizen James Allen Johnson. Whereas James A. Johnson, all caps, is a municipal public transmitting utility bank account belonging to the U.S. citizen James A. Johnson. These accounts are under your name, and you are supposed to know how to operate them. Now, I don't even really know what a public transmission utility is. Does anybody have any information on what that really means, that public transmitting utility?
It's basically referring to the straw man or artificial entity.
Okay, thanks, Duran. Appreciate that. Talking about the straw man. Okay. Anything else on chapter 9? Chapter 10 is existing contracts. Talks about the constitutions. And the constitutions, once again, are important for the sake of reference points and basic principles. But we must realize that the function of the Constitution was to set up governmental service agreements. Right? In other words, the Constitution doesn't give us anything. The Constitution doesn't have any power. The Constitution is really a hedge, a fence around government, the service contracts, right? At one point, our country was small and didn't know how to do a lot of things outside of the state and local capacity. So they hired these institutions to do these federal things, right? But the rules that they were supposed to follow was the Constitution, right? Each of these honorable service contracts impose responsibilities on each of the parties and the granting of powers, permission to act to enable the recipient of the contract to perform their duty, right? But she says America is all grown up now, able to provide its own navy, its own military, administer its own territories, control its own money, and set its own trade policy that the states originally handed over to Federal Confederacy, British Territorial, and the Holy See. All right, so in other words, the Federation of States says we need somebody to handle trade, national defense, money. How we're going to do that? Well, of course, the Crown, the Holy See, they know how to do all this stuff. And so they were hired to do these things. And the rule book that they were given was the Constitution. Of course, that's all been manipulated and changed and hidden from us. But that's what we had. And where she goes with this later on in chapter 10, she compares what we were given at the beginning to an old Victoria era house. And so 150 years later, you come across that house and you want to buy it, well, it's going to need updating, right? She says, so once our state Jural Assemblies are restored, fully functioning, we can call for our public elections in each state and elect deputies to send a Continental Congress, land and soil jurisdiction. And that is where our updates and changes are going to happen. All right, so maybe we don't need the Holy See to do certain things for us. Maybe we don't need the British Crown to take care of certain things for us because we can do it ourselves, right? 150 years later, we've made advances. We can operate our own Navy, our own defense. We know how to do these things now. We don't need you. Let's change the Constitution a little bit. But we have to stand up our assemblies. We have to send folks to these continental congresses to make that happen. And she ends chapter 10 talking about Paris Accords and climate change and how it was really just an attempt to take all our gold. Interesting reading. All right, so that's all I've got for chapters 1 through 10. Once again, this isn't designed to be in-depth. This is just designed to be exposed to it, to know what's in the book, so that when you go through and read it, you've got an initial understanding of what's in there and some of the important things to take out of it. Any questions, any comments, anything that I said that wasn't clear? Anything anyone would like to add on anything that we talked about? And folks, I apologize for my use of go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I just want to say for the chapters that I caught, Tom, you did a great job in explaining it, and I commend all educational speakings and where we're going over material and we learning. You know, it's all positive, and like I said, you did a great job.
Well, thanks, Ron. I appreciate that, and I apologize for my use of PowerPoint, but that's all I know how to use right now. Maybe as we go along, I'll have something a little more high speed. And any recommendations you all have to any kind of program that's little bit more of not so much the 80s and 90s, I'll be appreciative. Once again, looking
This
at
is
other
Anita. I
resources.
just want to thank you too.
Okay. Thanks, Anita. Appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Other things we can be looking at,
Thank you.
that we can look at is,
Thanks, Tom. I look forward, Tom, to doing more with you as we move along.
was that Todd?
I said I look forward to working with you. I know you're chairing, but I want to step up to kind of partner in this and help you along with this.
Well, since you brought that up, Todd, I've got an assignment for you if you're ready. This book is 5 years old, and I think there's quite a bit of articles. We talked about 2 of them today that have updated a lot of the information. If you have time and are inclined, if you could kind of try to pick out some of the articles that have updated the handbook so that we're not getting old information, I would really appreciate it. I'm trying to do that, but there's so many. I just did a search on her website, Jural Assembly, and there's a ton of them that.
So these articles are from her website that you found that have been updated?
Yeah, she's got quite a few. Duran found a couple of them talking about that 1860 stuff, and but there's more as we go along. I just want to make sure that we have proper information as we're going through these chapters, and we could say, okay, well, chapter 10's been updated by this article here. So if you wouldn't mind helping me point those out, that would be great.
Okay. And what was the resource again for because I just downloaded a version. I didn't get the book itself.
Oh, okay. The Jural Assembly Handbook.
Yeah.
The version I've got is May 22nd of 2019.
Okay. I'll have to look and see what the download version or whatever is. But I was thinking, I'm like you, I like an actual book versus online. Now, sometimes it works, but especially in a pinch, but it's nice to have a physical copy.
Yeah, I agree. So excellent. Go ahead, Anita.
Anita. Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that these committees, I kind of like to think of it as like King Arthur and the Round Table. Everybody's on an equal level. The chairman and the coordinators are just our go-between between the General Assembly and the Federation. So everybody needs to stand up and voice their opinion and, help everybody along. There's no priority person in any of these committees. I yield.
That's great. That's a great point, Anita. Thanks for bringing that up. Like I said, again, this is not my training. This is not my Jural Assembly. This is ours. We need to make this training what we want it to be, so that when we progress to the pillar building stage, that we're working together as a team, and and it's ours, right? It's not one person's pillar. It's our pillar because we built it together. So if there's something else you'd like to see me bring up, then, or a different direction you want to see me go in, then I'm all ears. I'm willing to work with whatever people can learn the best. So these are 3 other things we can be looking at. Excellence in common law. It's a big book, but a lot of information. Common Law 101, Michelle Ford, I think she does that on Thursdays at noon. And then Christy Leeper, I think, Laura, you've been on there. I'm planning to try to get on there because apparently it's really good. And I think we all kind of need to be familiar with litigation and what that looks like and some of the terms that are being thrown around.
Tom, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Duran, Ms. Jefferson. I like to also put out there again that when we're doing research, we want to go to Anna's site and punch in the search bar, because it's like our own encyclopedia. If we want to get in depth on any issue, any subject, just type it in there, and Anna gonna have a list of stuff. We just go down there and do our research and add it to whatever we're trying to do. Yeah.
No, I think you're right, Duran. Thanks for pointing that out, because you're right. That's where all the information is. And once again, if we're all going to stand on the same ground and be using the same weapons, and that's our resource is Anna. All right, with that, that's all I've got for today, 1 through 10. The last thing we need to talk about is a better date and time. Friday at 3:30 apparently doesn't work for everybody. I want to try to fit as many people in here as possible. But this Friday is a hard date for me. I can do Friday at any time. I can do Sunday at any time. I prefer to stay away from Friday night because that's kind of family time. But I can do Sunday afternoon or Sunday night if that works for everybody.
What time do your night start?
Duran, what'd you say?
What time do your night start?
I could do Sunday anytime.
Okay. Now, reason why I asked about Friday because Belinda, she said she can get on possibly about 5:30, I think. If that's not possible, if I was just trying to figure out your cutoff point on Fridays, so you can spend time with the family.
Yeah, probably right about 5:30 is probably when I'm
Okay.
either getting dinner ready with the kids or doing something with the kids. And then
Okay.
But
Okay,
Friday.
the people that's on here now, would Sunday be convenient just to add more people on Sunday? If not, we can keep it Fridays, and some people just won't be able to make it.
Does Sunday work for anybody?
Sunday work for me.
Can you say that again, Anita? Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Sunday. Are you thinking about like what, in the evening or what? Because I mean, I couldn't do it earlier. It would have to be more in the afternoon or evening.
Does Sunday at 7 work for everybody? 7 p.m.
That would be fine with me.
It works for me.
Fine with me.
All right, well, let's do that for now. We'll plan on the next one being I'm just gonna throw that out to the group, 7 p.m. and see what the reaction is, and then we'll go from there. But we'll plan on that. So thanks for that, folks. Other than that, that's all I've got for today.
Well, thank you. You did a great job.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tom.
Tom.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Tom. See y'all. Everybody have a good one.
Y'all enjoy your weekend.
You too. See ya.
All right, bye-bye. Thanks for being here.